Welcome back to Sailor's Disgrace. This is our first interview, our first bonus episode. In this episode, I interview Shannon Norenberg. Shannon is the Sexual Assault Response Coordinator for the Coast Guard Academy. She, coincidentally, is the person that I came out to with my story, and because of her and through her, I was able to be where I am today. So it's been a long journey, and I gratefully appreciate everything that she did to put me on those first steps. And today she shares a lot about her life, her passion, how to make the Coast Guard and the military better in general. And stick around for the entire episode. There are some good resources at the end. And again, thanks to Shannon for being with us and providing some insight. So take a listen and please leave any comments or suggestions on our Facebook, Instagram, or on Spotify. Once again, thanks for listening. Hey, all right. So, welcome to the podcast, everyone. This is Sailor's Disgrace. This is our first interview. And today we have Shannon Norenberg. And Shannon, if you don't mind, just please introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah, so I'm Shannon Norenberg, and I work at the Coast Guard Academy as their sexual assault response coordinator. And I've been doing that work since roughly 2003, 2004. Was working nonprofit and then started to work for the Marine Corps doing this. And then I've been with the Coast Guard for the last 10 years. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. I also am an Army veteran. So a lot of my motivation comes from that too, just being in the military. And that's part of my story. We'll get to that.
Okay, excellent. So, you mentioned that you are the Sexual Assault Response Coordinator at the Academy. What specifically does a SARC, as we call them, do?
So the SARCs were set up by the military to essentially take reports of sexual assault and help people report or not to law enforcement, to help people get resources, and also to really kind of talk about it. Educate people, talk to people about how to report, that kind of thing. So my role at the academy is to do just that. Be there for people if they want to report a sexual assault or even get information about reporting. We have confidential ways that we can do that also. And also, like I said, it's my job to talk about it. So I do a lot of training and talking to not only cadets, but over at the leadership school there at the academy, where we have all levels of leadership come through there. And almost every leadership class over there has a little block of instruction that I come talk to them about basically their role as command and kind of how this plays out and rolls out and what the policies say about it. So that's kind of a long answer, but
No, that's
that,
excellent.
that's kind of what it is. And also really to try to spur a little social change. I mean, honestly, I do spend most of my time more upstream trying to like train and educate than I do taking reports, which is great. I wish I could spend all my time upstream doing that, and that I could really get ahead of this. So part of what I'm doing is trying to do that, just push social change forward on this topic entirely, because I do feel this is one of those things that the military has had such a hard time tackling and getting their arms around. Everyone has, right? Like every organization, every entity has really tried to, but I do think that it's possible for a group of people, an organization, to decide to no longer tolerate certain behaviors. They've done it before, they can do it again. So
Right.
I'm there to remind everybody of that.
Yeah, and that's a lofty goal, to do a culture shift like that. And I've experienced it. I've been in the military for 20 years now, and I've seen a shift just in the past 10 or 15 years or so. And it's been met with a lot of resistance, I'll be quite honest, and at various levels of leadership, at deck plate leadership. And then sometimes it feels as if, you know, uh, it's almost over encumbered upon the member. I remember back about 10 to 15 years ago, I think it was 2012, 13, when I made chief. and I was in the chief's mess and working with all of these old school salty chiefs, and they didn't want to hear it. You know, they just did not. They may have even dealt with it in the past, but they didn't think it was that big of an issue, or they're just tired of hearing it. We had so many all hands meetings, and so it's like this oversaturation point for many of those people. I felt, but I felt that change in the guard, so to speak, of the younger generation was being brought up with this. At those accession points, like you're doing at the academy. And do you know? I'm sure you hopefully you know, but there must be some kind of counterpart in the enlisted side. Does Cape May, New Jersey, or our boot camp, do they do a similar training?
Yeah, they definitely do. And like I was saying, they have inserted sexual assault training into all different levels of leadership training and a session point and, trainings to
Right.
include boot camp. So yeah, they
Okay, include
definitely
boot
have.
camp. Yeah,
Yeah.
because quite honestly, I don't remember 20 years ago.
Yeah, I definitely didn't. I was
Hmm.
in the army longer than 20 years ago,
Yeah.
and we definitely didn't have any of this stuff. There was no SARCs. We didn't talk about discrimination. We didn't talk about hazing or harassment or anything.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, I was told basically like, you joined the military. What did you think was going to happen?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If anything bad happens to you, it's your fault.
It's your fault. And it's
Yeah.
like this attitude of weeding the weak out. Basically, if you
Yes.
wash out, if you can't take it, that's on you
Yep.
because you're weak. And
Exactly.
so, unfortunately, people who even experience the assaults think that about themselves, and that's part of the barrier. Is even,
Right.
do you know what I'm saying? Even the programming that we all have. We've
Yes.
all seen it. So it's like hard sometimes even for us to break out and go, oh, okay.
Right. 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 Yeah. So you have that perception, and to bring up the perpetrator and the victim, do you think that that kind of environment breeds perpetrators, or they're drawn to that kind of environment because they can see that they can manipulate that system? I mean, I personally feel like that's the case, and sadly that people take advantage of that. I'm not
Um,
sure if you think that way, or if you've seen that before, or had those kind of conversations.
I think organizations like this are just ripe for it because of the power structure.
Okay.
So, um, y- is there evidence that people with that type of personality go towards certain type of jobs that allow them to take power and have power and hold power? Maybe. Like,
Hmm.
it makes sense to me that if you had that type of personality where you liked that and you don't think it's a problem that you're doing it, in fact, you're fine with it, yeah, you probably are drawn toward occupations like the military because you are able to eventually get into positions of power over people.
Right.
And that's where I think it's like the whole thing comes up against the that what I was just saying about the expectations of how you're supposed to be and act and what it's supposed to be like in the military and what you should be doing and how you should feel and act and all that versus the reality of people's situations when these things happen. It's so different, and it's unexpected how people react to their own self, even. So I think the system is just makes it easier for people to do the things sometimes. Not the system, but the structure of
Sure.
just the military or whatever.
Hmm.
But also, certain types of climates make it really hard for this to come out at. And it's what you're talking about when you're talking about like the old school where it's like, yeah, this is just how it is here. It just lighten up already.
Hmm.
It's that one. It's that climate. It's that where it's a joke here, where it's like not taken seriously. And we're going to take, and if you're not laughing at the joke, it's because there's something wrong on you somehow.
Hmm.
It's that place that's so hard for people to come forward when the things are going on. And then we turn around and say to them, well, why didn't you tell us?
Yep. Exactly, exactly. And to bring this a little further back, it's since I've created this podcast and this community, I've had actually people reach out with stories of World War II and Korean vets having exactly the same thing that happened to me, or very similar situations, and they don't talk about it until they're in their 90s, and
Yeah.
they've held on to that for 70, 80 years, and they're having dementia problems because of it. And it's staggering to think of that, that it's been going on for forever, and
Yeah.
that's where I feel like this culture shift, it's difficult. It's necessary. It's definitely necessary to protect each other, ourselves, and our soldiers, sailors, airmen, all our defenders, and just people in general. I think this is great that we talk about this stuff in college and high school. And I have two children, a son and a stepson, and they're entering that middle school age, and I'm gonna have to talk to them about this stuff. And not that I'm excited to talk to them about it, but I feel honored that I can talk about it. That we, as a society and as a culture, we're starting to shift towards normalizing talking about these things. Because as a kid of the 80s, I never had this conversation with my parents or grandparents or parental figure or clergyman, and like I said, in the military, it just didn't happen, and I feel like that shift is happening. And um, but I don't know if it's a fast enough change, or if it's how much resistance is still out there with this change. But and like I said, I just hear these stories of things happening a century ago or almost a century ago, and it's just heartbreaking. you know um, so oh,
Yeah,
man.
I agree with that. It's like the culture change feels so slow while you're in the
Mhm,
daily of it. When you
mhm,
look back, you can look back. Yeah, like I grew up in the 70s. Yeah, we didn't talk about it either.
mhm.
We weren't like all sorts of sketchy things happened back then that were and like even watch movies from the 70s and 80s. Like let's
Oh
get the
yeah,
person drunk to have sex with them was the trope. Like that's
yeah,
what we're doing. That's the joke of
yeah,
the movie. You know
yeah.
what I
Like
mean?
high
Like
school, college movies, like every single one of them.
yeah,
Yeah,
is nuts what we were exposed to, what we were programmed with. So
yeah.
I think part of the transformation that the military is going through is kind of like a similar in the sense of like a painful transition to
Mm,
something different and better. But
mm.
it's painful while we're in it. This transition of like people go through transitions in life, same thing, where we're just going to go through a painful part of the transition of this, where at some points you're going to find yourself in your fifth briefing on this and you're going to be like, okay.
Yeah,
um, you know what I mean? Like there was a point and I was like sick of talking about it. I was like, wow. And I never get sick of talking about this, but like, can I not say it again for a while?
yeah.
Because we were going at it so much. But I think that it's like the pendulum swings a little at times where it swings real hard one way. Again, the painful transformation was needed. There was a lot of that stuff that needed to be said. And actually, hashtag me too in 2018 brought a lot of people out of the woodwork.
Hmm.
And there was so much support for people at the time. I don't necessarily feel that still. Like,
Right,
I do think there's like waves of support for this. And then people get over it and they're like, well, you should be over that by now. And it kind of
right.
reminds me of like as the people around survivors, the friends and family sometimes will do that to them where they're like, well, it's been 4 months.
Hmm.
Like, why are you still talking about this?
Hmm.
And you're like in your body and brain, you're like, what are you talking? Like, are you kidding? Like, it's like, I'm still fully, you know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about? Like, so I think that sometimes the wider military community does that reaction to us where there's almost like a backlash. And
Yeah.
actually there is a flash effect for sexual assault training that we actually do know about where certain types of offenders actually get triggered by it. So um,
Mm.
that's a certain effect we know about where it's like it's a hard line to really walk to really talk about this in a way that's productive that people will listen. A lot of people don't want to hear this because it's hard to hear.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable for a lot of
you
people.
know
Yeah,
it's uncomfortable as hell, and like people are proud of their military service, and I just want to say I'm really proud of my service in the army regardless of whatever happened. You know
yeah,
what I'm saying? I'm so proud of it, and I'm proud of my service, my country, all of that. And anything that happened to me does not diminish. And just because I'm here saying that there's a problem or there's been a problem of how we handled it in our systems does not mean I do not 100% the Coast Guard, the Army, the United States. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
absolutely.
there's
Yeah,
room for that. We need it. We need the discourse. So I actually really appreciate this podcast, this conversation that we're having, because
yeah.
we need to get the discourse out there on this.
Thanks, Shane. Yeah, that's exactly my intent too. And I wouldn't have served 20 years if I didn't feel like if I loved it or if I didn't care.
Right. Yeah,
and to just to be a vocal critic of something doesn't mean that you hate it. uh,
exactly.
Keep your head in the sand and move on isn't healthy for any situation, much less sexual assault or military service or a relationship or whatever it might be.
Yeah, for sure.
Raising kids, for example.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
If you don't say anything, nothing's ever going to get better or change or grow. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's an excellent way of putting that, Shannon. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's a long road to go, but we're on the right track. So speaking of being on the track with that, what put you on this path of being a sexual assault response coordinator and got you into this specific line of work? Um, was it just something that you decided to follow and you just became passionate about because of what was happening within the military, or do you mind just speaking about that for a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I have a story around this. Absolutely. I joined the army at the ripe old age of 18.
Mhm.
Um, went to boot camp, and on the last day of boot camp, felt immensely powerful that I had just like gone through this amazing transformational experience where I became a soldier, and I was feeling on top of the world. And unfortunately, I was preyed upon by my drill instructor, who I don't know exactly how he actually got me. I unfortunately like was one of the few persons at boot camp who didn't have a family. It's like family days the last day after boot
Yeah.
camp, right?
Mhm.
Everyone shows up, right? I didn't have a family to show up for me. So 6 or 8 of us went up to a hotel room that he actually arranged for us, and I have absolutely no memory whatsoever of what happened. I know that I woke up in a hotel room,
Mhm.
uh, and I know it took us at least 2 hours to get back to base. And I have absolutely no memory. I woke up during the rape, and I didn't process it for a very long time. I said to myself, okay, well, I don't really remember it, so it wasn't that bad. And actually, it's fine. I'm fine. And I'm just going to pretend that never happened. I was pretty drunk, and because we'd been drinking, and I don't even know where we got the alcohol, probably him. Um, but I suppressed that for a lot of years, and I had panic attacks, and
Yeah.
I was a mess, and I pretended it wasn't that. And I one day was like reading the newspaper. So this was back when we read newspapers. So
Yeah.
it was like late 90s, I'm gonna say. No, early 2000s, because I saw an ad that they were looking for rape crisis counselors. And I just remember this bolt of fear went through my body. And I said to myself, ugh, I could never do that. Oh
Mm.
my God. Like, how do people face that every day? And it shook me. I can't explain it. It shook my body. Okay. But I was obsessed with it after that. And it was as if I knew I was supposed to go to this volunteer training. I needed to face this thing. I knew it. Like subconsciously, it was back there. It wasn't too much in the front of my mind, but I knew I had to go do this training to just basically answer this hotline, right?
Mhm.
So I go up to the rape crisis center and I take their training, and it changed me. And it allowed me to see it. It allowed me to say it. It had literally been almost 20 years, I want to say. 18, I can't do math right now, but
Mhm.
it was many years, right, before I even voiced it out loud, and it allowed me to do it in a way that for whatever reason just empowered me. It just and like I started to do the work and answer the hotline and work as a volunteer at this rape crisis center, and the people I met there that were helping the other people, and just what I saw there, I knew that that's what I was supposed to be doing. And that
Wow.
I don't know how else to explain it. I knew that's what I was supposed to be doing, and I started to just feel a fire about it. And so I worked in nonprofit rape crisis, and right around 2009, I had finished up like my bachelor's degree, and I was like, wanting to make more money, a little bit more money, because I was working nonprofit, and they know it doesn't pay well, right?
Yeah.
So I'm on USA Jobs because I know I'm a veteran, and I'm thinking maybe I can get a government job. And it was right around the time that they were hiring SARCs, the very, very first round of SARCs that were hired. And we did not know what we were getting into. I'll tell you that. So I ended up getting hired by the Marine Corps. Just being a veteran, I'm sure helped me out, and I was literally working rape crisis at the time that I applied. So I went over and I was willing to go to Japan. So I went over to Japan and I started to be a SARC for the Marine Corps. And they basically taught me how to do it. And it was insane. It was
I can only imagine.
extremely
Yeah.
different than I thought it was going to be. But I felt it was such a perfect place for me, because having been in the military and really understanding what that feels like to be in the service is like unexplainable to people who haven't been. So I
Mm-hmm.
just felt like I could be somebody that could be there for someone like I did not have, period. And that's it. I had no one to tell at the time. I don't know who I
Sure.
would have tell. The man put me on a bus and I went to my next station, and that was it. And I can't imagine being able to even process my event, much less track down somebody to tell them. And so, like, part of what I know as a SARC, all of those things are still true. And even if I am sitting there saying, hey, everyone, I'm here, talk to me if you need me, still people have to go through that processing and allowing themselves to even say it to themselves and like accept that it's happened. To get to my office is scary as hell still.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes, it is.
part of my part of my passion is trying to be available enough that maybe I can spark one person. And that's really what I feel. And I've had moments where I've spoken to a whole auditorium full of people. And sometimes you can feel when people are with you, or you can tell when people don't want to hear you. And I felt all those things, but I just know in my heart there's a person in here who needs to hear this, even if it's 1 out of 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say it, because like I was that 1 out of 1,000 person who needed someone to say
Mm-hmm.
something, like, hey, that wasn't okay. Just that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Just that. So like that's really what it is. And so then I worked for the Marines for a few years, and then Coast Guard Academy came up. And honestly, what I had originally been trying to do was go work at a college and run a college program.
Hmm.
So there you go, military
Yeah.
college
There
like
you got
popped up,
both.
and it's been the passion of my life being there.
Wow.
It's been an honor.
Wow.
Honestly, it's been an honor to be there.
That's fantastic. And thank you for sharing your story. I know it's difficult, and I'm sorry that happened, obviously.
Yeah, thank you.
But it seems to have put you on a path that is doing good, and brings you purpose, but also can console and shed light for people and give them hope as well. And I know it did for me. And I don't want to get too much into my story at the moment. This is your time to shine for the interview, but it was because of that, like you said, that 1 in 1,000, or that one person that needed to hear it, or to understand what was going on. You did that for me, so it does work, and you do have impact, and I know it's not just me, but you've definitely impacted lives and started that culture shift. So thank you for what you do, and I'm proud of you, and I'm honored to know you. So
Well, thank
um,
you so much. Yeah.
yeah, before we get more choked up, let's ask some more
Right.
questions. So bringing it to modern day and to where we are now,
Yeah.
and I'll just bring a little quick thing into this. Recently, the Coast Guard updated their sexual assault policies, correct?
Yep.
And I saw it in an email, and it was an all email blast to everybody, got to see it. And I read it at home, and I started reading it, and I read the first 2 pages, and then I skimmed really fast. I just started scanning it, and I got to the last page of however many pages it was, and then I went to my bedroom and I collapsed.
Okay.
And luckily, I have a very loving relationship. My wife came and consulted, but it triggered me hard,
Mm.
and weird things like that. Sometimes it's something directly related. Sometimes it'll be something on the news or whatever it might be. But I had a complete and total meltdown, and I couldn't read it. And I've since kind of scanned it a few times and haven't had the same reaction. But for whatever reason, it just hit me just right that day. And so I'm not a good resource to explain all those details of the recent changes. Do you mind explaining to some of our fellow coasties out there the recent changes to the program?
Yeah, absolutely. And just a note on that about how recovery like comes and goes in waves. And anyone listening to this that has felt moments of like, hey, I've got this, I'm doing great. And then suddenly something hits you out of left field like that, and you find yourself in a collapse moment. Like you
Hmm.
got to just, you almost just let that flow. Like your body needs to react, let it react. Like when you fight it is really when it's harder, you know? So like,
Yes.
don't be mad at yourself or upset at yourself when that happens, or don't think that you're going to go back, backwards necessarily. It's okay. It's like, all right, I'm going to breathe. I'm going to breathe through this, and I'm going to be able to get back up at the top of that wave again. So like, just to anybody who hears and just I feel you on that. I've
Yeah.
definitely had those moments. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's talk about a little bit about the policy. So
Sure.
somewhat of what has gone on in the policy is they've broadened a little bit of who can hear about and take sexual assault. Uh, who can hear about sexual assault disclosures without having to report it to command. That's one
Okay.
of the main changes. And this is basically putting into a reg what was previously an all coast called confiding in another, which
Hmm.
allowed people to basically disclose their sexual assault to somebody, certain people, without having to make an unrestricted report. So where we're at now on it is essentially the only mandatory reporters are people who are in the direct chain of command of somebody who they supervise. So like anybody you supervise, if you do their marks, if you're, their actual supervisor and you know about or hear about a sexual assault, you're a mandated reporter for that person.
Hmm.
As far as anyone else, you can kind of hear about it from most people. If you have a peer that's your same rank, even if it's somebody who outranks you, but they're not in your unit or your direct chain of command, they can still hear about your sexual assault without having to go unrestricted. So I think they're just trying to loosen up the mandatory reporting a little bit, and they have. So that is one of the main changes.
Okay. And
So
is that to encourage more reporting? Is that why?
I think
Or
so. And I
hmm.
think what people have to really remember with that thing is that, yes, you can tell your roommate or your friend or whomever you want, and they don't have to report it now, which is good. We have some social science that tells us that mandatory reporting laws actually suppress reporting. So
Yes.
we do know that happens. But sometimes the people who receive the information don't know what to do with it. And
Hmm.
this is where we got to really educate everybody on it. Where if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I was sexually assaulted and I don't know what to do. Instead of being like, wow, are you sure you want to say something about that? Or, say whatever random thing comes to your mind. What we want people to do is say, hey, shipmate, let me find you a victim advocate. Let me find you a SARC right now. And I hear you. I'm sorry. Let me find some help for you. That's what we want people to do, is like hook people up still with the SARCs and victim advocates, even though more people can hear about it.
Hmm.
We just want to make sure people are still getting the services and everything that's available to them. We still want to catch people, what I'm saying, not catch in a bad way. I mean, catch them softly, give
Right.
them a safe place to land is what I should say.
Okay. Okay. I like that. To
Yeah.
me, I kind of reflect back to what happened to me, and had I been able to speak to another E3 or E2 and confided in them, had that knowledge that I could talk to somebody and not automatically go to the captain,
Yeah.
or that would have been less terrifying. Still
Yeah.
terrifying, but less terrifying. So having that safety net, so to speak, could have helped me, and I'm sure will help others in the future. So that's good. I think it's positive change. What other changes have come up with the policy?
I mean, there's a bunch of little detail type things
Okay.
that are real specific to like response timelines and who goes to which meeting and that type of thing. Do you know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Like we have like a meeting called a crisis intervention meeting with every unrestricted report, and there's some changes on who's required to be in that, for example. So a lot of it is that type of thing. There's some clarification on the difference between someone disclosing a sexual assault and someone reporting. And they just wanted to be clear on, you haven't actually reported officially to the Coast Guard until or unless you have filled out the CG 6095. Like there's a
Hmm.
form. there's a form you fill out. We're the government, right?
Yep.
Like, but part of that is to put it on record, number one, so it's officially on record. Number two, this gives you access to certain services. And number three, like later you get out of the military, you have that for the for like the VA. If you need services, maybe you have some PTSD from this thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's that stuff. You can claim it, all of that. So we want people to have that form. So part of my job actually as a SARC and part of the VA's job is to help people understand why they should actually report. Because we want to be able to help them with that. Even if they want to make the restricted report, get them that. So the instruction just clarifies the difference between a disclosure and a report, and just tells the command that it doesn't matter if a person signs a 6095, you still make it an unrestricted report if you know about it. And to basically, their procedures are no different. Does that make sense? So like
Yes.
if the command hears about it, they act as if it's unrestricted.
Right.
And the unrestricted disclosure restricted language is almost more for the SAPR program for us to sort of like
the managers of the program. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like it tells us who gets what information, right?
Sure.
In a disclosure, nobody gets anything. So I don't tell anybody about it. It still stays confidential with me, but it isn't on record in the sense of like I don't have any paperwork on it.
Got it. Okay. Okay. No, that makes sense looking at it now and being trained on it now. And I will say, having gone through that process, while it's happening, it's very confusing.
Yeah.
Even when the best laid plans, and it makes sense to you as the SARC, or it makes sense to a victim advocate or whoever it might be. And I was trained on it too. I was a chief. I was a warrant officer by the time I came out with my story. So obviously I've been through plenty of training.
Right.
And actually it's because of your training. We went through an 8-hour training session. So I was very, very well versed in it. But as soon as I had to do it, man, that all went out the window, and as far as being the victim and
Right.
and you're being explained this process of, well, if you do unrestricted, it means this. If you do restricted, it means this. And every scenario, every situation is life-changing. At that moment, you're thinking, oh my God, if I choose the wrong thing, then this could happen and my family could happen and this. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very hard. It's very difficult to digest that. And like you said, we're the military. There's going to be processes. There's going to be forms. There's going to be paperwork, and that's there for a reason. And I appreciate that and I respect that. But it's daunting, for a victim. I feel, at least it was for me. Maybe not everybody, but
no, I think it is daunting for everybody. Just getting pulled into a process while you're trying to actually integrate trauma.
yes,
That's what's the hard part, because you don't retain it. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
what it is. It's like, damn, what did she say? And I know I'll have people come to my office and they'll be
Yeah.
like, I know what you said to me, but I don't remember. And they'll be
Yeah.
apologetic to me. Like, I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
sure.
And I'm always
Listen,
like,
Shannon. Yeah.
I'm always like, don't apologize. Like, look,
Yeah.
and I'll even say to people, like, you're going to not remember this. And it's okay when you come back later and ask me again. I'm going to tell you again. It's fine.
Good.
Like, because you can't process all of that. And the whole thing is that people's lives don't stop. And you're still, you're still a dad, you're still a service member, and your job doesn't slow down. There's no pause for you.
Right. Yeah, you gotta get
still,
back to work.
You do. And it's like, even if you leave for a minute, there isn't enough leave for you to take to be able to be completely whole by the time you're back. Like, you can't just, like I was saying before about, like, it's been 4 weeks, aren't you better now? It's like, nope, that's not how it works. So the pace of the military doesn't allow you time really even to breathe through the whole thing, right? Like, you know what I mean? And I see people kind of going into processes sometimes with like deer in the headlight, and I know that that's what they're experiencing. And and I'll see them a year later, and it's like a year later they'll finally be like, okay, wow, all right, now I finally understand what's going on. Like, like, it took me that long to really be able to, like, what is happening, who has this, where's it going, what happens next.
Sure. Are there any discussions at the higher levels of giving people that time? So say someone comes forward with an assault or harassment, and it's too much for them, and obviously they're referred to medical. And I think in my podcast and one of my episodes, I'll talk about my Coast Guard medical experience, which it was not positive, but
Mhm.
sadly. But what has there been discussion of that? Has there like not a mandatory time off or anything like that? But are there thoughts on that, or is there
Yeah,
understanding
no,
of that?
actually, thanks for that question because that kind of reminds me of other things in the that they put in the instruction, and some of it was that they
Okay.
basically put in that you can get like 30 days like convalescent leave, and this
Hmm.
is something they were doing already kind of anyway, but now it's in the commandant's instruction. So um you could get 30 days leave, and I know for sure because I've been helping people get to inpatient treatment programs where we have sent people places for 60 days, 90
Hmm.
days,
Hmm.
where there is some inpatient treatment programs in the United States that specifically treat military service members for sexual trauma.
Okay.
So if somebody has some deep trauma, if something they really need that, we can absolutely do that. They also put in like basically they authorized a certain amount of unrated time.
Hmm.
So let's say, this happens to me, I can get a waiver for the time, this 3 to 6 months or whatever it is. And I actually don't know how long the time is. I can't remember. But there's a certain amount of time that you can be not rated.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So it's
Yes.
like, because there's an acknowledgement that people in trauma just are reacting, and like your performance probably will decline.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
you know what I'm saying? Like it should be expected. So therefore they're not gonna rate you during that time.
Okay.
So that's something. There's like a weight program. You can get a waiver for that. There's an expedited transfer process. We've had that.
Sure. I know that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but they've I there's something like for A school. This happens to you in A school. Um, and they'll pull you out of there and put you in the next class. You don't get bumped to the end of the waiting line.
Hmm.
If it's you're taking a service wide and you have that coming up and this just happened to you, you can take the next one. There's a waiver for that. So we have these special victims counsel, these lawyers
Hmm.
that will help people get some of these waivers in place. And the SARCs, of course, will help people with that. But so that's some of the stuff that they've added, some like recovery things that they've tried to really get people some resources for that exact thing where it's like, I
Right.
need more than just my weekly counseling right now.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, exactly. And I think
yeah,
that's part of the reporting problem for a lot of people.
yeah.
Is that one, you're traumatized of what happened to you, and then two, it's the repercussions for your career. For
Hmm.
you think, oh my God, I won't even have time to recover. I won't have my command's going to hate me, or they're going to move me,
Right.
if I say that I need help, then I'm going to be discharged. Um,
Yeah. People really worry about a mental health diagnosis.
yes,
And like, is this going to somehow make me not be able to carry a weapon? Is this going to affect my security clearance?
yes.
When I was working for the Marine Corps, I remember they grounded a flight surgeon after she reported a sexual assault, and she was really upset about that.
Mhm.
So sometimes it has some impacts on people. Well, not sometimes, always it has some impacts on people. So some of the stuff in the instructions trying to address.
That's good. I think that's a good way forward. I don't know if there's a clear cut answer on that. I think each case is its own individual case and they have their own nuance, and everybody needs something different. But I think being able to ask for those resources and like say, hey, I need Hums orders, I need
Right.
convalescent leave, I need help, and not to be afraid to ask for that, because you might lose your job, and that was my fear, my personal fear. I
Hmm.
couldn't say certain things to medical because, and sadly I've seen people get discharged for saying that they were deeply depressed or suicidal, or and they're immediately processed, or they were 20 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. And there's barriers for people at all levels. So
Right.
if I'm a junior person, maybe my barrier is that I don't want to, I just got here, I don't want to disrupt that. Maybe you're a senior and then your barrier could be, wait a second, I'm supposed to be the leader. I'm supposed to be in charge, and like, I'm falling apart. And like, how is this happening? Or even like, something like reporting something that happened a long time ago, because as you report, you start to relive it all.
Mm-hmm.
And then people will say, well, that happened a long time ago. Like, why do you need an expedited transfer? Or why do you need this service?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Again, people on like, what do you need? So, or why do you need that? That suspicion of like, wait, are you just reporting this to leave? Are you just lying
Yes.
about this to get out of your unit?
Yes.
Those type of questions that unfortunately people still experience. And my
Mm-hmm.
answer to that always is, I can't even get people that actually were raped to come forward, much less people that are lying about it. And I'm going to go ahead and trust my system. And that's what I can do. Do you know what I'm saying? And I would
Sure.
rather offer services to somebody who actually didn't have it happen than not be able to offer to somebody who had it happen and just doesn't get the service offered. Does that make sense? Like,
Right. Right. No, it
yeah.
does.
So
It
what if
does.
you expedited transfer somebody who like made it up to get out of their unit? I don't think it happens very often. I think it's extremely rare, but that person probably has some issues and maybe they need to go. So
Mhm.
like, I don't know.
Yeah, and I've dealt with that too.
Yeah.
I've seen people transferred in and out of units because of that, and they have a stigma attached to them immediately.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Immediately. Right.
immediately, and
Like, what are you doing
it's
here off cycle? What
right.
happened to you?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Why are
Like,
you here? And then the Coast Guard's so small. We're like a giant high school in some respects. So everybody knows everybody, and it takes 2 phone calls to figure out what happened,
yeah.
and that's it. And that person's stuck with that stigma, and that's another part of reporting that makes it terrifying. And I kept it close to my chest for 12 years before I came out, and I was part of it. I was afraid of what everyone might think,
Right.
and how small the service is. And my brother's in the Coast Guard. My father's retired Coast Guard, so
Mhm.
we generational. We know everybody, and
Right.
and if everybody knew this, then oh my God, and that's all part of it too. But I'm glad you spoke on that. That's good that you're thinking of that, and the high levels are thinking of those kinds of things, and understanding that people may need those resources, and to try to minimize the negative repercussions on their career and then their self as well.
Yeah.
Um, so that's really good. So speaking of, I got negative repercussions. For me, I'm not specifically in my case, but what I've seen too in other cases is the failure of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, or the military justice system, I should say,
Yeah.
and prosecuting many of these cases. Do you feel like something could be done to help with that, or do you think also that a civilian court or a non-military court should be involved in pretty much every case? Is that a possibility? Um,
So, yeah. So, another thing that actually is laid out in the instruction is the Coast Guard, like the other military services, have established this office of the special prosecutor to take all sexual assault cases. And they're going to start doing this at the end of the year,
hmm,
where right now, all cases are being adjudicated at the O6 or the flag level.
mhm,
And they're pulling all the cases out and sending it to this one office who's going to do it. And part of this is to make sure there's no bias in the chain, and make sure the cases are looked at fairly, etc. I will take the military's prosecutors over the civilian prosecutors any day of the week. I'll say that any day. And
mhm,
here's why. Give me another organization that has spent the time, the money, the energy, the resources, and actually trying to come up with a system to help people to report sexual assaults. It just doesn't exist. Maybe some universities have,
right.
but the military, now they've been pushed by Congress to do this. So thank you, Congress.
Mhm,
But nevertheless, they've done it. So I think the system itself, I'll take it over any other system. But the nature of sexual assault and rape makes it very difficult to get cases. So what I would really want is people to have a command climate set up wherein people can come forward as soon as it happens,
right.
can get physical evidence so that we can get cases prosecuted, because it's really, really hard to get convictions in these types of cases. The civilians are absolutely no better. I mean, we heard about the Stanford swimmer kid who was raping the woman behind the dumpster and ended up doing 3 months.
Right.
So like, it's not as if the civilians have this down. Okay. They don't. Now it's definitely not a perfect system. And the whole thing we're looking at is beyond reasonable doubt. And it's a high standard. And I know we all want a higher standard. We do. We all want that. Okay. We all want
Of course,
beyond a reasonable doubt. Of course we do. But it ends up making rape and sexual assault being sort of a low risk, high reward crime, in the sense of people exploit people's vulnerabilities. And it's such a shameful thing that happens. The perpetrators know this. They count on that. They count on the shame to silence it. And that's how they get away with it over and over and over, by making people think it's their fault, by perpetrating these ideas that somehow you can get yourself raped, by suggesting somehow that it's anyone's fault but the actual perpetrator. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And those questions that come up to people, are you that, all of those things, like, that's what they want. They want that. And the more that we buy into that, and the more we laugh at the rape joke and watch the movie where that's the punchline, all those things we were talking about earlier, it's like, that's what they want, so that they can continue to do what they want to do. Most of us don't do this. The vast majority of us require consensual sex partners. The vast majority. So it's literally a very small percentage of people who are doing the things. And our system just can only get so many of them. And because people are afraid to come forward, and all the barriers, like getting them to come forward is hard. Not to mention the fact that a lot of times what the perpetrators answer to the question of, did this happen? Their answer is often, yeah, it happened, but it was consensual.
Right.
And so that's hard again to
How
come
to
up
prove
against.
that?
Yeah, because it's like, okay, well, maybe there was physical injuries during the sex, because actually forcible rape is extremely rare. Most people's response to a rape is to either to freeze, to people don't know how to react. Okay, so like various things happens to their body where they don't even know, they don't even understand what happened. They're in their own mind, and so these things happen to the people themselves. So they'll say to themselves, well, I must have consented because I didn't get up. And actually, that's what I had told myself about my drill instructor, because when I awoke to it, I didn't get up. How could I? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the thing I had in my head that has been planted there by the people who wanted it there so they could get away with the thing. Do you know what I'm saying? And to say, oh, you wanted it, right, Shannon? You wanted it. And you were wearing that skirt, that little sparkly skirt that you decided to put on. Do you know what I'm saying? It's that stuff. So to me, it's like, I think our system does its best. It's not perfect. Absolutely not.
Sure.
And it definitely misses some things. And it definitely, like we talked about, the kind of the power structure in the military that makes it real hard for people to come forward. So, and the fact that people move around a lot. So you'll have people who do things in certain areas and then they'll move and do it other places. So this doesn't help. One of the things that we have in place is this catch a serial predator system. The entire DoD has this, and it's basically a website. If a person makes a restricted report, they can go into this website and put details about their perpetrator into the website, into the Catch a Serial Predator website. They get a like a unique username and password from the SARC, so their name doesn't go in it out. It's their restricted report number. So they go in and they can put that person's name, and if anybody else does the same within 10 years, they'll get a match. Basically what happens is the SARC gets notified, and I'll get a phone call saying, hey, this restricted report number and this restricted report number, would you notify them? And then I track them down and I say, hey, somebody's matched you in Catch. Do you want to change your report to unrestricted? And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. But so they got the option. And now we're able to track people. It's called Catch. And like previous to Catch, we had no way to do it. the SARCs would know about the restricted reports. I could fully know about perpetrators or alleged perpetrators. I could know about it and say nothing. And it's not like I could call up the other SARCs and we had a secret list or something. Like there's, we didn't. It's not what we could do. We weren't able to do that. So now Catch really has been helping have some system to set up, serial perpetrators, serial offenders. So I'll give extra points to the military on that too. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like, absolutely. Great. I want to hear all that. They've opened up reporting for former members, for retirees. If you've ever been or served and something happened to you, we'll take your report. I'll take your report from 1982, if that's what you want to say. You know what I'm saying? Like, I do believe our system does its best. It's a tough crime to prosecute. Period.
Right. So with that, there's a lot of resources there. There's databases, there's things that connect, and that's a good network to have and a good resource for you, and I think for other SARCs and just our military justice system in general. But speaking on, again, the military justice system, let's say a case goes through and there's no prosecution for various reasons, could a victim or survivor, sometimes I hate to use the word victim, but a survivor at that point, proceed with a civil case in a civil court, for any kind of justice? Would that be a possibility, or is it basically it's shut on the military side and they don't have any recourse on the other side?
I think it would be really tough. You'd have to have some evidence. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I know it's like preponderance only, but like you would have to probably hire yourself a lawyer and have some evidence and try to go after somebody like that. Would be a lot of energy.
Sure. And I don't want to get political with this podcast, but recent political events and stories, things like that do happen. It may not be a criminal case,
they do.
but it could be a civil case, and
absolutely.
Obviously time, money, resources are different for different people, but I could see that being a potential, and maybe certain cases, someone feels like they just really need closure on it, or they really need some kind of justice or awareness to, hey, this person that did this, guy or girl, whoever it was, really needs to be held accountable, really needs to have a spotlight shown on them and to prevent this from other people. And and I felt that in my case, and I'll talk that in my podcast later on, but I felt that justice wasn't served. And obviously I understand 12 years, there's no physical evidence and all that stuff and so forth and so on, but nothing happened, and that's part of the ultimate defeat. It felt like with what I went through. It's like, okay, I went through all that and they got away with it,
it's
hard.
devastating. It's honestly devastating. And it's like, almost, I want to, when people come forward to say something, I almost want to be like, there's a part of me that's like, only a certain percentage of these I know end up in conviction. Very small percentage, but like at the same time, you can go through the whole process of this thing and not get a result that you want. And I'll always say to people, like, make your expectation be about your own healing and not an outcome, because you're not going to get that outcome. You're not going to get the outcome you want. You won't. Okay. You won't. I promise almost you won't,
Hey,
so
you might have rage and want to see that person burn. And
you might have all of that.
Yeah.
But you're probably not going to get it. But like, if you focus on you and you say, I'm going to do this for me, just to know that it's out, to know that I said it, you know what I'm saying? And like, the world knows, like, it doesn't matter. In some ways, of course it matters, but in some ways it doesn't matter the outcome, in the sense of like the journey of going through it all is for your soul. It's for your healing, for, you know what I'm saying? Your transformation.
Absolutely. And and I think you hit the nail on the head there. And that's the ultimate goal, is to heal from this and prevent this and stop this from happening. So future generations, our kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, uncles, whoever, don't experience this, don't have to deal with this, and just put an end to it, and I think that's a lofty goal, when you consider all the troubles and ills in the world, but I think it's a good goal to have, because if we didn't have that goal, then what's the point? you know?
Exactly. And you know what? The Bhagavad Gita says no forward progress is ever wasted. Not to
Ah,
pull out that, but like
awesome. Yeah.
the whole point of that being like your effort toward that wasn't wasted, even if it didn't end up in a conviction for somebody. You still went forward. Do you know what I'm saying? You're still part of the brave group of people that said, I'm going to do this anyway. This is going to be sucky. It's going to hurt,
Hmm.
but I'm doing it for me and I'm doing it for my service. I'm doing it for my country. I'm like doing it for all of us. You know what I'm saying? So like, so on that note, you still won, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. You too. And obviously
Yeah.
you're winning. So
Yeah,
thank you.
exactly. We're winning. We're winning.
Yeah.
Exactly. At the end of the day, we're still winning because our voice is the ones being heard now. We're the ones saying, hey, look this is uncomfortable. Maybe you don't want to talk about this, but like, let's talk about it. Let's get it out. Let's heal it. And let's make sure this doesn't happen to other people. And so nobody else has to like crawl through the mud, the blood, the pain, the sweat, the tears of these processes, because it just doesn't happen here,
Hmm.
because everybody's on board with not letting it happen. And yeah, you absolutely can do everything right around you, and you have bad people do the bad thing. And I don't want to suggest that, it's anyone's fault but the rapist. I already said that.
Yes. Yes.
But at the same time, there's a lot of stuff that people tolerate around them, that they
Hmm.
let go, that they say is harmless, that they tell themselves it doesn't matter, but it matters. It matters. It matters to the people who need your voice. It matters to the ones without power. It matters to the ones that are the ones in the future that are vulnerable. All of it matters. Every step, every single person took toward justice or toward transformation of self, or even just, you know, thinking about the system as a whole, it's inching it forward painfully slowly,
Hmm.
but forward it inches, I'll
Yeah.
take it. I'll take it.
Same here. Same here. Wow. Awesome. Um, well, Shannon, I just want to say again, thank you for anything else, for everything. And do you have anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Just thanks so much for inviting me on this podcast. And I wish you luck. And I know that there's survivors out there listening right now who have not reported, who haven't dealt with it. And I just, I guess I would wish for them to just like hang on, and just like listen and just try to maybe gain a little strength from others who have gone through it before. Because when you hear their stories and like you see their lives are transformed in the end, then you know that you're worth it. And that's really what it is. Like, you, dear listener, you're worth it. You're worthy, you're the prize. So like,
Exactly.
make sure you remember that about yourself. And I guess I'll leave it with that.
Fantastic. That's exactly it. So, Shannon, thank you so much, for joining me today. Thank you so much for what you do every single day for our service and for our members and for everybody. And thank you what you've done for me. And I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for you and your work. So thank you so much. And I have nothing but love and respect for you. And I hope to see you in the future. Maybe next time I'm up at the academy. I'm not sure when I'll be there, but there's always some reason to be at the academy. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. And have me back after a while, after your podcast has been going for a while.
that'd
Have
be
me
great.
back and we'll chat again. We'll see
That
how it's going. How about that?
that sounds like a plan.
All right.
All right, thanks, Shannon. Thanks for everything.
Yeah, great to talk to you.
All right, have a great day.
You too.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Thanks very much to Shannon Norenberg for her time, her insight, her wisdom, her guidance. I really appreciated talking with her and getting some wonderful information as well as hope for the future for the services. I think it's in good hands with people like her at the helm. So again, please leave comments or suggestions at the Instagram or Facebook or here on Spotify. And if you have any direct questions for Shannon, please let me know as well. I really appreciate everything. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care of yourselves.